Hey, what is up guys? It is Slickmoff here. I'm back again with another video. In this one, I want to give my thoughts on getting into comic books and just give you a solid introduction on where to begin if you haven't read comic books and you want to. And, you're a big fan of, let's take Batman for instance. You're a big fan of the Batman Arkham games. You really enjoy Batman v Superman and the Dark Knight films and stuff like that, but you've never actually read a full-on Batman comic. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this video on this website in particular is because I was actually researching just some of the videos that exist on this website about how to get into comic books. And I found that a lot of them are from people that are extremely pretentious and lame and just losers and are just total jerk-offs because basically they think that they're cooler than you because they've read more comic books than you, which is sort of ridiculous, right? It's sort of the wrong way to look at it, as opposed to like, trying to get as many people into comics as possible. Like, okay, I have a YouTube channel about comic books. Let me try to get as many people into this thing as possible because I enjoy it so much. I want to have other people enjoy it too. But no, that's not their mentality. They're pretentious about it because they're more experienced with it than you, which I think is kind of asinine. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons I want to make this video. You're a big fan of superheroes and stuff like that, particularly DC and Marvel. I understand that, manga and stuff like that is a thing. I don't have too much experience with that, to be honest with you. But particularly, superhero comics, and you want to get into it. So I want to give you my advice. I'm not a comic book expert by any means, but I read them on a somewhat frequent basis. I like comic books, and I own, I own comic books. I read them. So for that reason, I've gotten into comic books, and therefore I think I'm qualified to tell you about, my thoughts on getting into it as a medium. So let me first start by giving you an introduction into like the comic book world of like what terminology is and stuff like that, and just like when you walk into a comic book store, what do you need to know? Because it actually can be somewhat overwhelming because you can look at a comic book and it's one that you're interested in and want to buy, and the price that is on the comic is not actually the cost of the comic books. You can get into an awkward situation, right, where you like walk up to the counter, you have 8 comics you're expecting to spend $20, and the clerk asks you for like 468, and you're like, the fuck, how did that happen? You know what I mean? I have these comics, it says on the cover they're $2. Well, the problem is you probably got what's called a back issue comic. A back issue is, I apologize by the way if this is like rudimentary for some of you. I know some of you know less or more than others. I'm just going to give you a whole overview in case you know nothing about comics, okay? So there's new comics, then there's back issue comics. A back issue comic is an old comic. A new comic is one that's on the stand like a newspaper. It's on like a newsstand sort of situation. There is no bag and board, and I can actually show you what a bag and board is. So I'll just show you my long box right here. So this is a bag and board. So I've got here an Aquaman comic book. Hopefully you can see it. And this is Aquaman number 5. It has a bag and board, so the board is on the back, it offers support, and then the bag, anti-acid and stuff like that. It helps prevent the pages from yellowing. It has a lot of different functions, and also just keeping it airtight, right, so no air in, which can age the comic and stuff like that. It's more of an issue in comics that are older and on like paper that can yellow or brown. For instance, I do have an example of a comic book like that. You can see right here, this is Batman Gotham Adventures that I recently got. You can hear, it's kind of like sandpaper. Hopefully you can see it. Whereas this comic, it's like silky. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's kind of challenging to describe. It's just a more modern paper, and that's less likely to yellow. In fact, it pretty much doesn't. As opposed to the comic I just showed you, where it's kind of like sandpaper when you rub it in between your fingers. Almost like construction paper in a weird way, but anyway, I don't want to go too far down that road. So there's new comics and back issues. Back issues are individually priced. New comics are based on the price on the cover. Okay, so you can buy a comic that has a cover price of 25 cents for $600 at a comic book store, okay, because supply and demand dictates the price of those back issue comics. And you just want to know what you're getting into. They should be clearly priced, but if you're at a disorganized comic book store, you can get into situations where it's not clear. And, I guess you can ask, but again, you get into the situation where a lot of people that own comic book stores are pretentious, right? And that's why I want to make this video, to give you as much information as possible so they don't, like, reprimand you or scold you for like not being knowledgeable or like chuckle at you or scoff at you, which is just very lame. I mean, if anybody did that to me, I would just walk out on them and just, you know, just screw you. I mean, you're a loser, basically. And I have had a situation kind of close to that at a comic book store when I was like young. But anyway, it's something that bugs me about the comic book industry. If you can't tell, it's sort of, I don't know, it bothers me a little bit. But anyway, so getting into comic books, what comic books do you want to read first? So you can read in an issue format, which is what I just showed you with Aquaman #5, right? It's thin, like 22 pages, I think most comic books are. It depends, though. And then you can also read in a graphic novel format. So I can show you a graphic novel or a trade paperback. So, for example, I can show you, you know, this right here. This is Batgirl Volume 1, as I just dropped my yearbook on the floor. This is not a graphic novel. This is actually a trade paperback. The difference is a trade paperback collects issues, comic book issues, okay? So, like, for example, Batman Rebirth collects issues 1 through 5 of, you know, Batman Rebirth, or, you know, and Rebirth #1. Whereas a graphic novel is a standalone reading experience, basically, is the best way to describe it. An example of this is one that you may have heard of before, Batman the Killing Joke. Batman the Killing Joke is a graphic novel, whereas actually a lot of comics that you think of to be graphic novels are actually not. Watchmen is technically a trade paperback because it collects issues. It came out in an issue format. Robin Year One. These are all instances of trade paperbacks. Again, this is something that I don't think matters all too much, but again, people that are kind of stuck up about this stuff will sort of get you know, muddled down with. I happen to think it doesn't matter, and I won't correct you if you call Watchmen a graphic novel. It's not that big of a freaking deal, okay? But I'm just saying, just so you know, just so you have the information, that people will get uptight about that. Okay, so you can read in issue format or a graphic novel trade paperback, whichever you prefer. Let's talk about characters that you want to read and like where to begin. I am going to go out on a limb here and say that it's going to be best for you to start reading with a trade paperback or a graphic novel of your favorite character. And my advice for starting to read comics is read what you want to read. Read the comics that intrigue you. If you're a Batman fan, and you Google online right now how to get into reading Batman comic books, right? What you're going to find is people that are going to list for you Batman's like life and career in order from like Batman Year One up to Long Halloween, Dark Victory, all the way up until Dark Knight Returns. Probably, I can almost guarantee you that's what you're going to find if you Google how to get into Batman comics. Okay, what I'm telling you is read what you want to read. Read the graphic novel or comic book that you've been dying to read or that you know about. In the case of most people, I think that's going to be The Dark Knight Returns, which to me is like, but whatever. You know, if that's you, then that's you. Batman v Superman, if you like Batman v Superman. Dark Knight Returns. The Killing Joke. Maybe Nightfall, because it was in The Dark Knight Rises, kind of. And then, finally, The Killing Joke. The Killing Joke, in my opinion, is the best Batman graphic novel of all time, maybe the best graphic novel of all time. For that reason, I would advise, if that's a story that intrigues you, then to read that. You all know that story, and I feel that some people might be like, well, I don't want to read that first because I already know it. But that is the exact reason that you should read it first, because you're basically getting into this medium for the first time. It's nice to have some sort of familiarity, at least with the story that you're getting into here. That would be my personal advice in terms of that. So, you know, even though you already know the story of The Killing Joke, you know these stories. You know what happens in Under the Red Hood. You know what happens in The Killing Joke. But for that reason, it's something that if you've been wanting to read, if it's a story that you like, if you like The Killing Joke, if you like Under the Red Hood, if you're a Red Hood fan, then read Batman Under the Red Hood first. Then read The Killing Joke first. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that's what I would recommend, as opposed to, you know, getting on Amazon and ordering Batman Year One, Batman, you know, Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, and just going up, because I think that there's a good chance you're not going to like Batman Year One. I don't like Batman Year One. I don't like it. I don't like Frank Miller. Okay? So, you know, you can be the biggest Batman fan ever, but also it goes to the point, you guys know Batman's origin story. Batman Year One is not a must-read comic book. It's just not. I mean, you don't need to freaking read that graphic, that comic book. Um, just don't. I mean, unless you're dying to read Batman Year One, you already know his origin. So I would I don't know, just read what you want to read. If you want to read Batman's origin in comic book format, then buy Batman Year One. If you really want to see the Killing Joke, then read the Killing Joke. Just read what you want to read. Don't worry about reading in order or like consequential canon order or any of that crap. It doesn't matter. Just read what you think is fun and what you think you can get into, because that's what's most important, is like finishing your first comic. That's important. If you buy a graphic novel that you don't like, or comic book that you don't like, and don't finish it, and it's your first one, there is a good chance you may never buy another one again because you didn't have a pleasant experience with the first one. So that's my thoughts on that in terms of the first one to buy, like the first comic books you invest in. Whatever. Think about what your favorite character is. Think about it in your mind right now. And then think about what story you want to read. Just buy that first. And you might be like, well, I'll get to that eventually. But no, I'm going to say read that first. Read that first. That's my personal advice. But you can also, do what they say to do on Google. That's totally, germane and fine. I'm not saying that that's, terrible or whatever. I'm taking my shoes off, by the way. Sorry. Been standing around, walking around for a while. Okay. So I don't want to, ramble on too much longer. Now let me just talk about the affordability aspect of it, because I think that's important, because comics is an expensive medium. It just is. You're buying 20 pages of entertainment for $3, right? And it costs so much to make a comic book. It's the only thing that they can charge you. It's not like they're trying to rip you off. They're not making a killing off these things. Like, it's not evil, corporate DC trying to make a gazillion dollars. I mean, comic books get canceled all the time because they make literally zero money or lose money. That's the case right now with Cyborg and Rebirth, and other characters and stuff. So, just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind, right? And the thing for affordability is this. Here's what I do. I do this still today, and I'm not even ashamed of it. I'm telling you right now. What I would do is this. Go into a Barnes & Noble or a bookstore, okay? Go in, pick something that you want to read off the shelf. Just anything, whatever you want to read, and start reading it. On the floor, in the bookstore, right there in the frickin' aisle. Nobody cares. I give you permission to. If they get mad at you, just tell them I said you can. And fuck off. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But seriously, nobody's going to get mad at you. It's Barnes & Noble. It's like a glorified library. That's what Barnes & Noble is. And they've got a coffee shop there. They even make it convenient for you, so you can sit down and buy lunch instead of buying comic books. And you can just read the comic books for free. And then when you're done, put them back. And then if it's something that in the future you really want to read, then you can. But if you're like me and you have no money to just drop, $100 on comic books a month, I'm a college student. I'm going to this school next year, okay? I've got to pay for that. And money that I would spend on comic books probably this year, I have to be conscious about that. So, that's just something to consider in terms of the cost. There's ways to get around it. There's pirating and stuff too, which I'm not encouraging, because we do need to support the comic book industry to some degree. I'm not saying, like, never buy a comic book ever and only go into Barnes & Noble's every single day and sit on their floor for 8 hours reading comic books for free and then putting them back and not buying them. I'm just saying that there are options that you can diversify your comic book knowledge and try characters that you're not sure you're going to like, and as opposed to buying them and then being like, oh, this sucks. I just dropped 20 bucks on a character and story I don't want to read anymore. So that's something to consider as well. My nose itches like hell, so I don't know why. But I'm going to end the video here, I guess, for that reason. So I think I've got everything that I wanted to say across. Like, getting into comic books, just read what you want to read. Read what you think is going to be fun. If you're a huge Batman fan, then read Batman. Read The Killing Joke. Like, you're gonna love that. So just read what you think is gonna be fun for you, and just don't let people that are pretentious and just kind of like jackasses about it, like, try to scold you for, like, oh, well, you haven't read as much as I have, or you're an expert, blah blah blah. That's just lame. It's just lame. So just read whatever you want to read, and in terms of the affordability and stuff, definitely go into Barnes & Nobles and just read some stuff, and not buy it. And sometimes you can buy some stuff if you want to. And, just basically for your pull list, if you want to have a pull list, I don't know if I explained, I just took another take before this, but a pull list is, basically you tell a comic book store what comics that you want, and they pull it out of the rack and put it in, a bag for you, and they just reserve it for you. And that's your pull list. Those are the comics that you're reading that week.